Hi. Today we're going to learn how to make a hook using some basic blacksmithing techniques and the forge. I've already cut us a piece of metal, a 1/4 inch square bar is what we're going to be using today. I've cut a long length, 24 to 30 inches long, so this way we can heat our metal, which will get up to about 1600 degrees. We'll still be able to hold it with our hand and hammer it. Later on, when we cut the metal to a shorter length, we'll be using tongs to heat it. So what we're going to do today is we're going to make a hook. And here's a few examples of some hooks that we've made in the past. Different lengths, a little bit different styles. We're going to make a hook today that has some twists in it. I'm going to show you how to make twists and a method of hanging it on the wall. So the first thing we do, we're using 1/4 inch bar because it's a thinner metal, it's mild steel. It is pretty malleable. You can heat and hammer it several times without it getting too brittle. It has a higher carbon content. So the first thing we'll do is we're going to draw out our metal to a point, and we do that by hammering it. We initially get a little 45-degree angle hammered into each side, each of the 4 sides of the square. Then we'll reheat it, and we'll start to draw it out in several steps, reheating and drawing it out a little bit, little by little. And then eventually we'll draw it out to a nice point, and then we'll put a little curl in it. We'll make a bend. We'll do some cuts and twists. We'll get to that point after. But initially, we're going to work on how we draw out the metal to a point. This is thin metal, so it really cools off pretty fast. So you only get a few hammers in with each heating. If you hammer it when it cools off, it does start to get brittle, so you want to keep it hot. So the first thing we'll do is we're going to heat this up in our forge. Now you can tell the temperature of the metal by the color. We're going to work, I said, like in the 1600 range, and that's a red-orange. When it's red at first, as it gets hotter, it goes red, orange, yellow. When it's red, it's about 1400 degrees, and then it starts to get a brighter red, 1500, then to orange, orange-red, and then an orange-yellow, and up to yellow. So we want to keep it sort of in the middle. Like I said, 1500, 1600, so we're going to get orange, orange, red. So we're going to use, after we heat it, we're going to use our anvil. And the anvil has a few different elements to it so that you can accomplish different types of things. Bending, you can make holes with the anvil. You can put other attachments onto the anvil to make different shapes and curves and curls. And I'll show you the anvil here. Okay, so this is our anvil. And so this is the face of the anvil right here. This is called the cone. And there's a couple holes in the anvil too. There's a square hole that's called the hardy hole, and a circular hole, the pritchel hole. The hardy hole is so that you can put other attachments. And you can buy pre-made attachments for the hardy hole with different shapes. It's depending on what you are making. Or you can also just make things. You can make your own hardy attachments. Okay, we wanted something concave about this size to hammer, so you can, depending on what you're making or coming up with in your mind, you could make different attachments for the hardy hole. The pritchel hole is to actually punch holes into the metal. Okay. So what we're going to be doing when we make our hook is, initially I said we're going to make a 45-degree angle. Sorry. We're going to heat our metal. I want to make a 45-degree angle on each side. Okay? And I want to try and do that with one hit. It may take more than one hit on each side, but you give it a good hammer, holding the hammer further back, okay, not choked up on the neck, okay, because then you're using the weight of the hammer more than the weight of your arm or your own strength, okay, so you're letting the hammer do the work. An important step is not to have your metal up on an angle, okay? Your metal needs to be flat on the face of the anvil, and then you're just gonna hold your hammer at an angle, okay? And hit that one hit, and then turn it and hit the next side, next side. The other important factor is you don't wanna have your metal in the middle of the face. I like to keep the edge of my bar close to the edge, the outer edge, because if you have the metal here, a lot of times you're going to just end up hitting your anvil instead of your metal. But if you have it out to the edge, you're more likely to hit your metal, okay? So first step, I'm going to heat up this bar till it's red-orange, orange-red, and then I'm going to bring it here, and I'm going to try my hardest to get a nice 45-degree angle on each side, and that's it. And then I'm going to take it and heat it up again, and then we'll start to draw out our metal to a point. I also have a bucket of water here. Since I have a long length, as I mentioned before, the end usually stays pretty cool, but over time it starts to get hot. So you always have a bucket of water, and you can just quench the end of your steel in the water and it cools off. And later on, when we draw this out to a point, the point actually cools off really fast. So we'll have minimal hits. We'll have less time, less hammers, because the thinner it starts to get, the faster it cools off, and you don't want to hit your metal while it's too cold, or it'll break. You can lose the tip pretty easily. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and heat up our bar in our forge, which is glowing bright orange now, and I'm going to try and heat up only like the first few inches, because like I said, I only want to hammer maybe a little quarter of an inch at 45 degrees on each side. So that shouldn't take too long to heat up. So now we'll just wait. Also, if too much heats up, what happens is, and you're trying to hammer just a small part, you can end up, it gets wonky, you know? You want to just try and heat up the part that you're working on so you don't have unnecessary bends that you have to fix. So if you do heat up too much, we have our water to quench, but I also have a little cup in here, so I can actually just carefully pour a little water on just up to where I want to cool off. And the rest of it stays hot. I'm going to go ahead and check it. So see, that's pretty nice bright orange. I'm going to give it just another second. I think I want just a little bit further. I'm actually going to use a 2-pound cross peen sledge. The 2 pounds is really nice. It doesn't really matter how strong you are. 3 pounds is even a little too heavy for really strong people or bigger people. I think that a 2-pound works just nicely. It's enough weight for this small material to accomplish what you need to accomplish without killing yourself. Like 3 pounds just starts to really get tiring. Okay, so that looks good. I'm going to go ahead and take it over to the face. Like I said, I'm going to keep it nice and flat on the face, okay? And now we're going to give it some hard hits. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, so it's already started to cool off. I'm going to go ahead and heat it again. I didn't quite achieve the 45-degree angle that I would like, so I'm gonna do it again until it looks good. Another thing is you want to always hit uniformly, okay? You want to try, if you're to hit it equally on each side. And you can assess, if you hit it like a little bit harder on one side than the other, then you can make a judgment, but you want to try and hit it uniformly. You also, to draw out metal, you always have to use square bar. If you wanted to use round bar for some reason, you would actually hammer your round bar out square on each side. You would make it square. You would draw it out to your point, and then you can hammer it back to round. But if you just tried to draw out a round bar without making it square, you would just flatten it. So it actually needs to be square. Another thing that's happened because this is so hot, the bar started to bend a little just from hanging in here. And you can always straighten out your bar by, if it's rounded, if you notice it's rounded this way, so you're going to want to make it convex, right? So you want the rounded part to be up. I'm going to lay it flat, and I'm going to give it a light tap just to make it flat, because I really do want to always be working with a flat bar. Okay. So now again, trying to keep it flat. Okay, we're getting there. And then sometimes it just takes getting to know the hammers that you're using and getting comfortable with the material and getting in there tight, not being afraid to get close. Once it's hot, it starts to heat up quicker. I'm still just working on getting a nice 45, because if I can get that 45 nice looking, then it's going to draw out better. In the pencil diagram, it shows the 45 to be perfect. Okay. Okay, the other thing you can tell it's starting to get cool when you hammer it and it starts to have a higher pitched, a ping, more of a ping, you know that it's cooled off and you should heat it up again. When it's hot, it doesn't have such of a high-pitched ping because the metal's so soft and malleable, but you can tell the difference. Starting to get a point, and now I'm just assessing it for unnecessary curves, and I'm trying to make it straight. slowly but surely we're starting to get a little bit of a point, okay? And as I start to draw it out and make this longer, I'm still keeping my hammer at sort of this 45 degrees, or at least an angle, okay? And I'm not trying to, when I draw it out, I'm not going to be hitting the hammer like this to draw the material out. It's more like this, because as you hit it, it's going to spread. So you don't need to do this, okay? So it's more of a perpendicular, slightly towards yourself hammering motion, if that makes sense. Okay. Still trying to keep this flat and no angles. Okay, so it's starting to taper a bit. Now, eventually, the very tip of it, I want it to be a pretty sharp point, okay? But I'm not going to get that point until the very end because as it gets so skinny, it can potentially break off or just melt off in the forge. So I'm going to leave it about this size, and now I'm going to start to hammer further down, okay, and make it long, but keeping the tip, looks like it's like an 1/8 inch, okay? So I'm going to keep that there until I get this drawn out to the length that I want to draw it out to, okay? And then if the last thing I do is I'll draw that point out to very pointy. And an example is this piece right here. You see how much this taper is like about this long, okay? Before I get the tip nice and pointy. So I'm going to do that to this. I'm going to draw this out nice and long, okay? Because once we have our very pointy tip, that's when we're going to make a little curl. We're gonna make this nice little curl in there, okay? But it has to be pretty thin and pointy. And you know, sometimes you do lose the tip, and if you should, that's okay. And we can just like sand or grind the top of it and draw it out, and we can get a new point. But we try and avoid that. And also hammering the point cold, if it's very pointy and you start hammering it too cold, it'll actually start to fold over itself. So it almost looks like a hollow tip. And we want to avoid that as well. So that's why the thinner it gets, the more often we'll need to heat it up. Getting a little better looking. Trying to keep it straight. Always sort of assessing to see what curves, which are real easy to get because it's such a thin material and it's so hot. That is nice and glowing. See, now that it's tapered and you're keeping it flat and you're hammering, it just continues with that taper. Again, you don't have to angle this at all. And I keep saying that because it's sort of like instinctual, like, oh, I need to put an angle on it, so you want to do this, but you'll just bend your material. Let's see. Nice. Still going to draw it out further before we put that point on it. Be really cautious of not hitting one of your corners, one of your edges. Always try and make sure you hit it on the flat. As soon as you start hitting one of your corners, you're going to start getting an unwanted twist. Also, we're using propane to heat this little forge. If you had natural gas available, you can get a bigger forge and use natural gas. There's also like coal-fired forges. You could actually make your own forge. But this little guy works great. Starting to get nicer looking. It's good to have patience when you're doing this, little by little. It's good to have patience. It's also good for getting out stress. Okay. hit the point though, like I said, I don't want to lose my point, okay? So now we're starting to get a little thinner. So already the tip starts to turn gray. And you can see it's still a bit red in here. The tip is already gray, so I don't want to keep hitting that. My tip, I worked a little bit on the tip first. It already turned gray, and I just sort of worked on the interior to try and straighten that out. So we're getting there, but we're still going to get it pointier. We'll still need it pointier to do our little curl at the top. Okay. There we go. It's getting thinner. If you noticed, all I did was I did 2 quick hits on each side for the point. It was already cooled off, and then I started moving further in to work on making that taper nicer looking and straighter. No, also when you're first hammering the metal, I may have mentioned to hold further back on the hammer so that you're really letting the hammerhead do the work using the weight. But when it starts to get fine-tuned and it's small metal, you don't need as much weight. I like to choke up on it because I feel like I can get better detail and have more control, and you just don't need as much weight. It cools off so fast. I'm only working on the tip now just to try and make that a very pointy tip. It also heats up fast, so. Sometimes it's more than I think it's going to be because I just want to get that point perfect without it breaking off. So it's not quite pointy enough. It just needs to be a little pointier. Now it's really going to be heating up fast because it's so thin. Once I get that hot, I'm going to go ahead and find a sharp edge on my anvil. Some of the edges are rounded over. So right here is kind of nice. I'm going to use this part here. I'm going to lay my bar over, and I'm going maybe about a 1/2 inch to 3/4 of an inch. I'll leave hanging over the anvil, and then I'm just going to hammer it down and make a 90-degree bend. Then I'll take it and flip it around and start turning that bend into a curl, like so. So now we have a little curl, okay? Just to reiterate, we make a little bend, 90 degrees, flip it upside down, then sort of work it over. And if you noticed, I used my leg to actually hammer towards myself. I turn the hammer around, use the cross peen side, and sort of hammer that part in to make it rounded, okay? So now what we're going to do after we have that part is we're going to work on this part, okay? So what I'm going to do once that's hot enough, I'm going to bring it over here. I'm going to remember to keep my little curl facing up. I'm going to use the cone to hammer this over, okay? It is going to spiral because the cone is conical shaped. I'm going to take it off of here, work the curve a little bit, and also straighten out. What will happen, I'll show you, is the square bar will end up sort of warping out a little because this is conical shaped, but we can fix that by taking it over to the flat surface and hammering it. So just to tell you that before I actually do it, so you know what I'm doing. So this is going to be the shape of our hook. And at this point, I'm going to need to cut our hook down to size, okay? So it's very hot. I'm able to hold it here. And if you notice, I don't have gloves on. I'd prefer not to wear gloves if I don't have to, because they have more control over the metal. If you are going to wear a glove, you can wear one of your welding gloves or a work glove, but only in your left hand or your non-hammer hand. In case you're a lefty, you'd wear it on your right hand. The hand that you hammer with, you don't want to use a glove because it could potentially slip off and you could lose your hammer, okay? So I'm going to go ahead and cut this down to size of what we want, about the size that we want our hook to be. And then we're going to start making a little wedge at the end. That's this part right here, this little step. And that's what we're going to use to hang. We can drill a hole in this after, and then you can just put a screw. That's how we'll hang it on the wall, okay? There's different methods, different things you could do to hang. I'll show you, actually, the samples I have. There's different ways. So we're going to do this. So I'm going to cut it down. I'll probably cut it about right here. And now it's going to be much shorter. So I'm going to go ahead and use tongs to heat it in the forge, take it in and out of the forge. And after we get our step in it is when we'll put some twists in it. So I do want to cool it completely off at this point because I'm going to use the chop saw to cut it down. Okay, so now I have a much shorter piece. I'm going to use these tongs to actually place it into the forge. Perfect. Okay, here's a couple other hanging methods for your hook. See this hook? We actually drew this out long and then just did a little spiral, and you can put your little screw right through the hole. This one is actually like a spike, okay? So this one would go right into a wall, a wood wall, just get hammered in there. This should be probably on a little bit more of an angle, but you get this pretty pointy, and that just kind of works like a nail. And if it's on this a little bit more of an angle, it won't come out. So those are two other methods to hanging your hook. Okay, so what I'm going to do when I take the hook out is I'm going to use the tongs to hold the hook. I'm going to make it so that my hook is facing down, and I'm going to use this edge, the sharpest edge I could find, which is about right here. I'm using a heavier hammer just for this step. I'm going to center the hammer face with sort of this line right here on the edge of the anvil. I'll be holding my hook perpendicular to the anvil, and my goal is to hit it with one hard hit, because all I want to do initially is put a little groove on that other side, okay? Then I'm going to heat it again. I'll move to my lighter hammer, and I'll start making the little wedge shape. So I found that sharp edge, I'm keeping it perpendicular. I have it about 3/4 of an inch overlapping onto the anvil, and I am aiming right for this spot right here. Okay, so now I have a little groove on one side. I'm going to continue heating it up, and I'll start making the wedge. Actually a sharper edge right here. Yeah. That should work. Okay, so once I have that little groove on one side, I'm going to use that little groove as my marker. I'm going to continue to use the same spot. If I move it around and the groove moves, it's going to change the little step. It's not going to be as nice, okay? So I'm going to try and find that same groove every time and keep it there and just hammer, keeping my piece nice and flat and keep hammering. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and use the tongs. As I mentioned, our tongs have a little diamond shape cut out sideways. They also have a, not diamond, but square, cut out in the front, so you can either hold your material from the side or you can hold it long ways. We're holding it from the side. Now that we already have our little groove sort of etched in there, I'm going to find that groove every single time. I'm going to make sure that I hold my bar parallel to the ground and the anvil, and I'm just going to keep hammering on that spot. So the sharper edge that you have on your anvil, you're going to get a sharper step in here, okay? Our anvil's a little old and a little rounded on the edge. Well, I'm trying to keep this side flat as this side steps in. So like I said, we don't have as sharp of an edge as I would like. I'm going to work on it a little bit more, but that's just something to be aware of. This is probably over 100 years old. It's a great anvil, but maybe some of the edges can be ground a little sharper for future use. But that's just something to know. So I'm going to keep hammering it a little bit more, maybe flatten and round this out a little bit more, okay? Also, if it moves around, you know, you don't keep it exactly still, that edge, you lose your sharp edge. There isn't a real sharp edge on this. Okay, I'm going to grab that again. Now it's getting pretty flat. You know, for aesthetics, you know, I might like to round that out, heat it, and like slightly finesse and make it a little bit rounder. But for the sake of demo, we're going to leave it that flat. At this point, you would drill a hole through it, okay? You take it over to the drill press and drill a hole before we do our twists. What we're going to do is we're going to put some decorative twists in the middle. I'm going to show you how to do that. We're actually going to use our oxyacetylene torch to heat real localized spots to do the twist, okay? This one has one twist going in one direction. We're going to put 3 twists in ours going in opposite directions. So at this point, I'm going to skip putting the hole in it or finessing, but I think that would be nice if you guys did that. But just for the sake of the demo, we're going to move on to the twists. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to quench this so that I can touch it. Done. Nice and cool, okay? So from here on out, we won't need the forge anymore. Okay? So I'm going to put 3 twists in the center of this, okay? So they're going to go in opposite directions. I'm going to use the torch tip because I only want to heat up a small area, maybe 3/4 of an inch, and then cool it, and then I'll heat up another 3/4 of an inch, do another twist, cool it, and do a third one, okay? Now something to know about the twists are the hotter and the smaller of an area, like so the hotter you get your material, the tighter the twist will be. And also if you heat up a smaller area, like only 1/2 inch, okay? If it's a little bit cooler and you heat up a larger area, you actually get a wider twist, okay? Where there's more room in between each twist, okay? So just to keep that in mind if you want your twists to be consistent or you want them to be longer or shorter, okay? So we're going to move over to the vise. And I'm going to use, so this is where our hook is, the top of our hook. So we're going to twist right in this area right here, okay? So I'm going to clamp this in my vise, sort of look at the area I want to twist, clamp it just above that, and tighten the vise. Okay. I'll light my torch, we'll heat, and we're going to be using this wrench, this homemade wrench for twisting hooks, okay? So what I want to do first is I want to get it to size because you kind of work fast with this, okay? So you heat it, this is already ready to go. As soon as I heat this area, I'll slip this on and I will twist it completely around in a clockwise motion, okay? Then after that, I'll heat above that and I'll go in a counterclockwise, and then heat above that and go again in a clockwise. So, we're going to use oxyacetylene to heat up our hook to make our twists, okay? Because I just want to heat up a small area, like this much, 3 times, okay? And we could do it in the forge if we had very controlled quenching system. You could heat it, you'd heat a large area, and then you'd quench on either side. But I love cheating and using the torch because then we only heat the area we need, okay? So I'm going to heat that area, and then I'm going to use this wrench to do the twist. But very important, I'm going to put the wrench right above the heated area. You don't want to put the wrench on the heated area because that's going to be the twist, okay? So I'm going to go ahead and turn on the acetylene a little bit, then turn up the acetylene to a medium to strong flow. That's about nice. And I'm going to slowly add oxygen. Okay? We don't have to make it quite a neutral flame, but we can keep the cone inside a little bit long as opposed to making them meet. That's a much hotter flame, okay? So I'm not going to go as high on the oxygen for this as you would for welding, okay? So now I'm going to heat up a little area. Remember, we don't want it to melt. We just want to get it like orange. And I like to do both sides, okay? Because I don't want one side to be hotter than the other. And a good 3/4 of an inch, maybe even almost an inch, because I like actually for the twist to be a little longer, okay? So if you have a short area that's heated up, you're just going to get a short twist, okay? So I'm going to leave my flame on and hang that right there. This is ready to go, right above the hot. And I'm going to twist evenly. .180, okay? 360 you might break, and try and keep it straight, okay? Now that I have that first twist in, I'm going to heat right above it, okay? Now, even though that twist is still hot, it's not going to be as hot as the area above it. And the next twist will only happen on the hottest area. The hotter you go, the tighter your twist. The slower you go, also, you can make the twist not so tight. Okay? So I went clockwise that time, going right above the hot. This time I'm going to go counterclockwise, 180. Okay? Boom. And you want to make sure you go 180 because this little step that we made, we were keeping the flat part on the back. Well, you don't want the part that you hang it to be at slightly of an angle, okay? So now we're going to heat a third area right above that twist. And we're going to go clockwise again, okay? So try and remember your pattern. Right above the hot area. Oops. This time clockwise again, 180. It's easy to get wonky too, so try and go slow, controlled, and stay straight, okay? We could always fix things, but there. Okay, I'm going to turn off my gas, my oxygen first, and then my acetylene. And then we have a hook. So that's going to be very hot. You can take your wire brush. If you notice there's a lot of fire scale flaking off. When you heat it, that happens. You can take your wire brush and clean it up. I just want to go ahead and get it in the tongs before I loosen it so it doesn't fall. And I'm going to quench it right away. Nice. And here we have some nice twists in our hook, okay? This can be, if you feel like you want to straighten it out, there's a little curve here. You can heat it up again and tweak, you know, assess after you're done if there's any fine tuning you want to do, okay? It's a good idea to drill your hole first before you put your twists in it so that you can clamp your material on your drill press, okay? But so there we have our hook.